That's great. It's not cats. This is not being on YouTube. This is a primo experience just for everybody here.
Yes, hello, Phil.
Awesome. Well, Rick, I'll let you take the show. I think we have Chip joining us too.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, and the last thing I'll leave everybody with, so there's a lot of people here, so I only see a handful of avatars, but there's much more people here than I can see. So we are doing a thing called front row, where as many people as that can come, we will mirror ourselves to as many spaces available. So the performers and the speakers may not be able to say you, but if we do a question and answer session later, you can use your emoji hand raise, and that will allow your hand to be seen across all spaces. All right, I will leave it to you. Enjoy, Rickard, and have a great time.
So thank you all for coming. Awesome to have the opportunity to talk to you all here. And we're basically going to try to do 3 different topics. With us we have some awesome developers who created great experiences like the Brookhaven Experiment, Everest VR, as well as raw data. So before we go into introduction, the way we're thinking about doing this is that we're going to do a quick introduction of ourselves and our company and what's going on, and then we're going to talk about how to create great virtual reality experiences. And the way we're thinking about doing it is basically 3 chapters. We're going to talk about how to create great presence and how to fulfill the promise of VR. And then we're going to talk about how do you create great social experiences like this one, and how do we take it to the next level. And then finally, how do we build a business in VR? How can we make money in VR? And as developers, how can we create sustainable business? So those are basically the 3 things that we're going to go through. But maybe we can introduce ourselves. Thor, maybe you can give a quick introduction of yourself. And
Sure can. Hi everyone. I'm Thor Gunnarsson from Soulfar Studios. We're the developer and publisher of Everest VR on Vive, based in Reykjavik, Iceland.
Chip.
Howdy, I'm Chip. I'm from Phosphor Games. We recently made the Brookhaven Experience. It's went pretty viral. It has 50 million views on YouTube from all the sites of it. But yeah, just here to have fun.
Excellent. And Mike.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike McTire. I'm the design director over at Survios, and for those of you who have played it, we created raw data and having a lot of fun.
Nice. Lots of love here. So, and my name is Rick Steiber. I'm the president of VivePort, and what we're all really excited about, all 4 of us, is the promise of VR and how VR is going to change the world and how we're going to democratize access to experiences. It doesn't matter if you go to the top of Mount Everest or if you're going to the pits of hell with Brookhaven. And I think that's what we're going to here to explore a little bit. You probably also saw that we announced an announcement for VivePort that we're coming to arcades. And let me just talk to you very, very quickly why that is so important. So the big problem with virtual reality has been a marketing problem. It has been that, similar to the Matrix, you cannot really explain the Matrix. You have to essentially take the red or the blue pill and walk down the rabbit hole and experience the Matrix. So what we want to do is that we want to democratize access to high-end virtual reality. And by making arcades available all around the world, what will happen is that you and your mom can essentially, for a few bucks, have the best kind of virtual reality experience on the planet. And at the same time, what we want to do is that we want to help developers reach a global audience and, in a safe way, in a DRM-protected way, essentially be able to build their business. And today, you've probably seen that, there could be arcades everywhere, but the problem is that even if you want to start an arcade today, you couldn't really do that easily because you don't have the commercial license. So what we want to do is to have an easy way where you as an operator can get a continuous flow of great quality content at a great price so that you can build your arcade. And what we found so far is that if you're an operator, it's hard for you to talk to hundreds of developers, so you need a platform. And if you're like our friends from Everest VR, a 13-people studio in Iceland, it's hard to talk to thousands of operators around the world. So there needs to be someone to bring them all together, and that's what we're trying to achieve with the VivePort Arcade Initiative. So hopefully you'll see a lot of arcades around the world coming very soon, and yeah, it's going to be exciting. But let's start with the first chapter. These fine developers have been extraordinarily good at creating presence, making you feel that you're really there, using the auditory system, the visual system, as well as your physical body to engage in VR and trick your brain that you're really there. So I thought I'll ask some questions, and we're going to talk about presence, and then we're going to open up for you guys to ask some questions as well. But maybe Thor, when you built Everest, could you talk a little bit about what you learned and what maybe some mistakes you did in order to create true presence in VR?
Sure. So the approach we took with Everest VR was really to try to create a experience that is as near photorealism as we possibly could. And we used a technique called stereophotogrammetry to actually take a database of thousands of high-resolution photographs of Mount Everest and the surrounding environment, and actually fed that through a software pipeline that created a 3D point cloud and then a mesh, and then reapplied the photographs as essentially texture maps to the 3D mesh. And of course, we did a lot of work on lighting, weather effects, really trying to get as close to a sense of a real-world environment from a graphics perspective and kind of how we produced the overall experience. And we felt that was important because to achieve true immersion in a real-world environment like Everest, you really have to get as close as you can to something that looks almost like a video capture. So that was kind of the task. It was pretty hard. I mean, there was a lot of optimization work. We developed an Unreal Engine, so we did get a leg up and an advantage there in terms of speed of development. But it did take some time to get kind of the frame rate and the visuals dialed in the way we wanted. And certainly, it was a bigger task than we perhaps thought at the beginning. But we were really pleased with the results, particularly the fact that we were able to bring in things like real-time particle effects to simulate snow in the environment, so that as you move your hand, the snow particles actually swirl around your hand in VR, which is incredibly cool, and just really, again, gives you that impact, that immersion impact that we're all trying to achieve as VR developers. I think the other thing maybe just to briefly talk about is we put a lot of effort into the audio design as well. So the sound, obviously, the ambient sounds of the wind, storms around you, but also things like audio cues like your breathing. So if you're in an environment where you're traversing the Hillary Step, for example, which is quite a dangerous, physically demanding hike, we increase the breathing rate basically, and that actually speeds up kind of the sense of excitement and adrenaline for people in VR, which is very cool.
Excellent, thank you. Speaking of breathing, Chip, Brookhaven, there's a lot of heavy breathing, and can you tell us a little bit about what you did to make sure that it's sort of a totally immersed and very scary experience?
Sure. Brookhaven, one thing we really wanted to do with Brookhaven was figure out what room space did really well. And we really didn't, since it's a horror game kind of, and we wanted you to be scared, we never wanted you to feel like you could have a gameism where you could leave, where you could just, if something was threatening, you could just leave it. So we really we didn't enable any kind of navigation conceit other than what your legs can do. And that way, if a big creature came at you, there was no exit. There was no way to just, to tunnel out or teleport out or any kind of technique. And, using that, I think, is kind of what really resonated with a lot of the people that watched videos of it, that, they see somebody getting attacked and the person screams because there was no escape from what you were seeing. And it was something really different to do in, with VR than something you could classically do in another game, where in another game you would just kind of, keep booking down a hallway or something. And here you were really confronted with that thing you were scared of. So it was trying to use VR in that kind of way that, it was really your body in that spot.
Yeah. I understand. Mike, I mean, you came in as a design leader in Servios, and you heard all these rules, but I think that now we're in social and we have sort of physical manifestations. I know that you learned a couple of things around, the embodiment and the avatar. Something you can talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, we were mentioning this the other day, and this is this is one of the interesting things, joining Survios a year or so ago, and at the time, right, the Vive wasn't out yet, right? The hardware was not available to the public. So at that point, there was very limited information. It was really just what the VR community had distributed amongst itself. And one of the things I quickly found when joining the team is everyone kept talking to me about all of these rules, all of these VR established things that this is the way it has to be done, you can't do it this other way, and so forth and so on. And it was just kind of a given, and the team was very adamant about that when talking to me. And well, the first thing I questioned was basically every single one of those rules.
Good.
It's like, well, how do you know that this is a rule? They say, well, everybody says it is. I'm like, well, that's not a very good answer. So we really started digging into some of those. I think some of the clear examples at the beginning is even just your avatar embodiment. That was a big thing. It is very cool here today. We see we all have very different avatars and such, and it works just fine. But even just at the beginning, everyone kept saying you can only have hands in the game, or a lot of people said only just hands, because that is the most immersive experience. And we found, at least for ourselves internally on raw data and all of our customers and players out there, that that's just not the case, where we, even right now, we have your hands and your forearms, and I can't tell you how often we put people in the demo and they would just stare at their forearms for a good, 2-3 minutes, just accepting it. And that's one of the really interesting things, that it doesn't matter that you're outside of VR and you're wearing a T-shirt or whatever, and then you play raw data and you're all of a sudden in a cyber ninja suit or whatever. It just becomes who you are, and we found that that is far more immersive than just the floating hands. Another big factor, or other rules that we experimented a lot besides avatar embodiments, is also just the player interaction and what you can or can't do to the player. Raw data, as I'm sure you know, those of you who have played it, is a very combat-focused game, and it has a lot of melee attacks as well, particularly from the enemies. So I've worked on a lot of different melee projects over the years, combat projects, and hitting the player, getting them to hit react, is a huge part of the typical systems, the gameplay systems. So at the beginning, everyone said, you can't move the player, you can't touch them, right? The player is where they are, you're going to make them sick. And I said, well, let's prove that out to me, right? Don't just say that statement. So I worked with the coders very closely, and you'll find it right now in the game. If one of the heavy robots punches you, you fly back 30 feet. And it's a pretty amazing experience, and it doesn't make you sick, or at least 99% of people, it doesn't make you sick. So we're pretty happy with that. But that actually, it wasn't a straight, obvious answer. This is something we had to experiment with, and it really was a whole bunch of tuning, finding the right velocity values for the ins, the outs, the active, and such. So we found all these things, from avatar embodiment to moving the player, hit reactions, to be a huge part of the immersion factor. That really helps.
Yeah. So I think what we'll try to do is see if we can open up for 1 or 2 questions. So maybe our moderators could give us a little help here and see if we have any questions to the developers.
Yeah, I can help you out. Sorry, I was having some UI issues. All right, so if you didn't hear before, you have a bunch of emojis you can choose from. There's one that's a hand raise. If you raise your hand, I will click on your hand, and you will be mirrored across spaces. You can ask a question. We will start, let's see, I think with...
Can I pick Suzanne?
Oh, here, I think I got... Let's see if I get this thing to work.
It's a lot of hands.
There we go. Mikkel, or Mikkel, you are mirrored.
Go ahead.
Nope, nothing. Nothing from Mikkel. There's the emojis.
So actually, when it comes to VivePort Arcades, we are kind of dependent on you developers to provide the solutions that we can implement. I think probably the developer who has the best answer to that is probably you, Mike. If you can talk a little bit about your local multiplayer experience that you have with the raw data.
Okay, so I'm not hearing
Sure.
the
I mean, so we, from the beginning,
annoying.
supported LAN play with raw data, of course, in particular because we were going to all sorts of demos, trade shows, and events. So it was just necessary in order to support that. So we found that there really hasn't been that much different from traditional LAN play to VR LAN play, whether you're playing over the LAN or whether you're playing over the internet and such. I mean, the traditional methods in which you find lobbies, host lobbies, join games, all of those traditional concepts and how you would set that up is just the same rule sets in VR.
Yeah, and I think it's for the arcades, it's very early days. I think I spent a lot of time in China looking at these arcades, and one of the things that looks very, very promising is that you essentially rent a room, and then you go to this room with your friends, and you put on the headset, and you're all in this magical virtual space, and then you can do various activities. So I think we're still in the early stage of what this is going to look like, but that it's going to be a social experience that you want to have multiplayer is for sure. That's for sure. Let's take one more question, and then we'll move on to social, which I think is going to be a hot topic here.
All right, one more question. Let's see. This guy over here had one. Let me see.
Here we go.
Hey, Ben, can you raise your hand one more time? Sorry, Ben, one more time.
I see Ben. No, I see Ben. He's here.
I know, and can you repeat so other people can see him? Can you raise your hand?
Okay?
Yeah.
Here, I'll repeat your question. Go ahead, Ben.
Okay, cool.
Okay, thanks. First and foremost, I just want to say congratulations, with your, real big success with the Vive exclusives. I'll say it's a fantastic effort made. The games, thus far show, vast, immersion.
Thank you.
Obviously, the question, the people asking the questions have been pre-selected.
I'd at least be looking forward to the VR game, at least, in the distant future when, VR is more accessible by the grand, market. I'd say, would you look to invest potentially in MMOs, like grand multiplayer experiences where lots and lots of people can join one server and interact socially or, let's say, competitively?
So to repeat the question for everybody not in this space, Ben was asking what Rickard was thinking about MMOs and bringing that to Vive and having lots of people all in one space.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of MMOs. I think that they work awesome in the PC world, and of course they work even more awesome in virtual reality. And doesn't matter if it's space or Dungeons and Dragons or you're just hanging out in some reality-facing experience. I do think that in order for it to work, I think there will be two things happening. One is you want to bring in people who are also not in VR, or we're going to be on various platforms. We're going to be on PC-based VR and console-based and mobile VR, or in the future sort of standalones. So I think it's important that it's an opportunity to bring in hybrids where you can bring in people from real VR as well as other people who can sort of peek in and participate with some limited experience. We are definitely interested in those kind of experience, and I think you could just look at League of Legends and Dota 2 and these awesome franchises that whoever builds the Dota 2 of virtual reality is going to be very, very successful. So hopefully some of you are working on that. Any other comments, Chip or?
Yeah, I would just,
Mike?
I mean, my previous company, I was with CCP, the makers of EVE Online, so our team has quite a bit of background and experience in MMO game design. I would definitely second the thought that that we need to
talk loud enough.
That we need to enable crossplay, across multiple platforms, because we need to have, a large user base, a large number of simultaneous logons, that kind of thing. So the extent to which we can make that happen, I think, as an industry, is going to be critical. And of course, it was very cool to see, for example, CCP announced with their project eValkyrie that they would have crossplay across multiple VR platforms for the same game. That's going to be a key factor. I absolutely agree with that.
So maybe we can move on to the second chapter, which is actually social and multiplayer. Maybe you can continue. So I know that you have some experience in terms of that social is not just social, but actually it increases the sense of presence and the enjoyment of the experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're huge believers in the power of persistent online worlds and VR. There's just no question that we, of course, all kind of collectively dreamed of this metaverse somewhere in the future, and we're starting to see the first steps toward that now. And that, of course, that will be it'll be critical to have, a satisfying online social experience with other people. Because after all, in the largest, most successful games around the world, the people are the content. Yes, you have game mechanics and you have genres and so on, but really it's about the interaction between humans, after all, that really makes the experience really kick in, and we certainly learned that with EVE, where the players themselves were, of course, the most valuable content in the overall experience.
Yeah. And Mike, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you were one of the pioneers in having multiplayer and co-op, and I know you guys are thinking a lot about how you take that to the next level. Okay, what can you tell you about social and your plans for the future?
Certainly, and that was a big part of our mindset as a studio from the beginning. That we've talked about this before. It's like with any traditional game, we found that with a normal game, right, you play a game by yourself, it's a lot of fun, you have a good time. But in almost all game products, if you play with a friend, it is really a lot more fun. It's just that social element. And we found that before, games typically used to be more social in the sense that when you used to have LAN parties back in the day, for those of you who have been playing games that long, that was a whole bunch of fun where you'd invite a whole bunch of friends over, and it's just a blast seeing them, whatever game you're playing, in the same room and being able to interact with each other and being in that same space. There's just nothing that's quite like that up until this point, because now with the internet, right, then all of a sudden everybody started playing games online, and that has all sorts of benefits and pros and cons. I'm a huge fan of that. I love playing all sorts of games online all the time. But we found we lost some of that social interaction that we had with LAN parties, having people in the same room with you, because you're just on voice, headsets, talking over chat programs, or you're just using keyboards. But now all of a sudden, going back to virtual reality, right, the next step forward, all of a sudden we're in the same room together again. And even in a space like this, it's really awesome to see everybody's avatars. We can see, your head motions, and we can see a little bit of your hands, and your mouth wiggles a little bit. But we spent a good amount of time, we're by no means finished, but in raw data, having the full avatar embodiment, right? So when you see the other character in the room playing Bishop or Sage or Boss or whatever, and they completely move their arms, they're waving at you, all of a sudden you get that that rush, that social rush that you used to have back in the day from those LAN party experiences, those in-person experiences. All of a sudden that magic is back in games that has been missing for a very long time. So we're really excited about that, and we really believe in investing more in our IK system and our full avatar embodiment system, and really think this is going to really push the social boundaries where games in VR are inherently going to be more social than they have been for the past decade. We're pretty big advocates of that.
Yeah, excellent, great. And we had a session at Virtual Reality Developers Conference yesterday, and when it comes to Brookhaven, there's a very famous video of 81-year-old grandpa who is basically fighting the zombies, and he runs out of bullets, and then he goes berserk with his hands and almost kills his wife. So if you haven't seen it, so I wanted to ask you, Chip, you had a lot of success offline, but you also seen that, social is not just in VR, it's actually an entertainment experience, even for people who are outside. Could you talk a little bit about what you've seen?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about Brookhaven is that, I mean, you hear about everyone saying VR isn't social, and I think like when VR came out, I think I had more VR parties and was invited to more VR gatherings than I had in games for the last 20 years. So it was like I was having more social contact with VR, even in single player experiences, than I had forever. So I think VR can be social even when the game isn't social itself, that you're getting people around, you're seeing their expression, you're seeing how they're reacting to things. I mean, it's amazing when you put someone in who's never tried VR before, and you just see them smile and in wonderment, and they're all like, I can't believe this is happening, and what, any game, they're seeing. So I think that's one end of VR that I don't think people talk about enough, that it right now is a social platform, even when you just have one device, not networked. The other thing is that I agree with that, the presence you get from VR, in this room here, of seeing people and the physicalness of it, that it makes it feel there's a crazy amount of immersion that you can't just do in a normal lobby, of a 3D game, that in VR you really get this sense. And we're looking at competitive multiplayer right now, and a lot of those, because it's we really feel that's it's just something that people aren't trying enough of yet in VR. But one thing I do think is strange with with games is that I do think there's this like push to get like, where's my 40-hour RPG? And like, I do question if like, I mean, I think every kind of game genre should be represented, but I think there's this high priority on like those kind of experiences, and not every experience necessarily has to work in VR. You don't have to be able to play a solo, like, you know, 100-hour RPG in VR. That might, maybe that isn't a good fit. Maybe it is for some people. I'm not sure. But I think there's nothing wrong with even just cool experiences that you've never done before that might only be 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what's exciting. The rules are not figured out yet, so we need to discover them together. But what I thought we'll do is that let's open up some questions regarding
Thank you very much.
How to create sort of an engaging platform. So, dear moderators, can you help me pick some questions?
Yes, I can. All right. Who's got a question? Let's try. Come on. Oh, there we go. Brett, you are mirrored to everybody. What's your question? You are currently muted. If you can look to your bottom left and click your unmute button. We'll give you another couple seconds, see if you can find it. Should be to your bottom left. That's all right. We can call on somebody else and see if we can get you a little bit later, Brett. All right. Who else we got? Sorry, Brett. Aw. Here, let's go over here. Let's see if I can get Chris.
Poor Brett.
Oh,
I feel for you, dude.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Is it? Oh, okay. Thanks. I just wanted to ask you guys, I've heard many different opinions when I asked this question, but where do you guys see social VR games and just VR in general in a year from now and 5 years from now?
So the question for everybody not in the room is, where does everybody see VR games, especially social VR games, in the future in the next year?
Yeah, let's do a 15-second answer, all of us, and we'll see where we're at. Maybe you want to start, Chip?
I mean, social, I think it's going to just keep getting better and better. I mean, you see that, you know, a lot of people are getting deeper into avatars, like how you represent an avatar and how, you know, expressive can an avatar be. I can already see in the audience the people that have the hands versus the people that don't, and just how much more expressive they are than the rest of us. But it's, I think just adding these layers and layers to things, and I think some of it is just even awareness. You know, there's only a handful of VR really kits out there, generally speaking, and then there's only, out of that percentage, you know, how many people are like jumping on all the time to things. And I think it's just opening this up, and I think as more and more people are seeing these kind of events, they're going to start joining in on them.
Yeah, I can go next. So I think today we're seeing these sort of social chat forums, but I do think that this is probably going to be a phase. Eventually, social is going to be like a horizontal layer that goes across all of our kind of application experiences, both sort of entertainment as well as sort of more, you know, business application, education applications, etc. And I mean, today we're thinking about us coming here to Allspace. I think, you know, in 5 years' time, we would not even, you know, think of it. It will be like electricity. It will just be there. And you know, it's like picking up your phone or chatting with someone. It will be a very natural experience. So I think social will be sort of something that's well integrated into everything we do. So it won't be that sort of much friction as it is today. So, but it's going to change the world for sure, and hopefully, you know, we'll get closer to each other, and we'll be able to do completely new things. And if it is in entertainment or gaming or education, it's definitely going to change the world. So, what do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I definitely would echo that same opinion. I think the big thing is right now, everyone's still experimenting in terms of finding what are the rules in VR, in terms of what's comfortable, what's not comfortable, what do people like, and most importantly, I think just what's easy. But as social features used to be, you know, a decade ago, something that wasn't really present in games besides maybe take a screenshot, the social features are now just integrated into the vast majority of products out there, from streaming to selfies movies to whatever it might be. And I think the exact same thing is just going to happen in VR, but I think it's in a much bigger way. This is just going back to, you know, we feel only so much social engagement on our current platforms and console games and mobile games and PC games and such. And I feel social engagement is going to be a much larger, bigger, impactful thing in VR, inherently because the immersion factor, the social factor is to, you know, a magnitude much greater. So I think it's just going to be par for the course, just like Ricard was saying.
So, Thor, could we have your 15-second prediction about 5 years from now? Where are we going to be then?
Okay,
you get the easy question. You get the easy question.
I'll try the 5-year view. So I think we'll have within 5 years really effective eye tracking, much better tracking also just of gestures, facial expressions, and so on. And that'll have a huge impact because once we have eye tracking, we get technologies like approaches like foveated rendering, which can give us 2-3 times the graphical fidelity that we actually currently have on high-end VR. So that'll be the big shift, sort of second-gen VR that incorporates eye tracking and kind of unlocks some really cool experiences.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. All right, we're going to come to the final chapter and the important chapter. It's all about money. How do we, as an industry, in the early days especially, how do we make money? And clearly, today we're creating premium content. We're making sure that users are, get taught to that premium content actually costs money to develop, and they appreciate it. We see the rise of new models. Subscription services becoming popular. We have in-app purchases in the mobile world, and but we don't really know. And there, a limited few developers are actually making money, and these three are actually been doing a good job. But I was thinking, Mike, I heard rumors that you actually made over $1 million. Could you talk a little bit about your advice to these developers on how to think about making a business?
Sure. So I think, raw data as a whole is doing very well. We're very happy with that. But as we've said before, we mentioned yesterday to a larger group, I think the traditional rules for game development and the monetization and being able to be profitable is just different in VR, not because VR inherently changes the business model, but inherently because this is a radically new platform for people to experience. So one of the big things is, in traditional console games, you would see your game come out, or PC games, and you would see the vast majority, a huge percentage of your monetization, your profits within the first month or two in sales, and then it would really peter off, and then people would move on to other products. But that just isn't the case, we found, with VR right now in particular. Beyond there being just more VR platforms coming out, more and more people are buying the hardware every single day. And we're seeing that with raw data, in particular on the Vive. It's not just word of mouth or people who are waiting to buy the product as we get further into early access or further into development. We're finding that sales are continuing to churn on and increase because there's more and more hardware units going out there. So I'd say for a lot of the developers out there in particular, don't assume or make a business model where you're saying, hey, we have to make all our money back or we have to be really profitable within the first month. If you can, that's wonderful. That's great. I know there are some fantastic products out there where they're made by smaller teams that have achieved that. But for everybody else, I certainly would recommend you towards thinking towards, a 6-month plan or a 12-month plan, because the number of people who can buy your product today on the Vive versus who will be able to buy your product a year from now on the Vive is going to be massively larger than it is right now. And those people are still going to go back and buy products that were released today.
Yeah. No, I think that's very good. And actually, just coming back to the arcade as a new channel for you guys, is in China today, if you spend maybe 15 to 30 minutes on a Vive, that experience costs around 60 RMB. 60 RMB is roughly $10. So the monetization opportunity in the public space is really, really good. So I do think that if you are building something, think about how can you potentially make an arcade version of that as well, because that might be something that not only helps you make money, but also build your brand and awareness to the larger public. So that's something worth considering for sure. So, but maybe, Chip, I know you have some thoughts around money making.
Yeah, I think it really depends on your funding. If you're totally self-funded, it's really smart to think of like a game design that can be cross-platform. because it's really hard to just, if you're self-funded, it's hard to make all your money on one platform because if your design can scale either way, then you've definitely got more streams of revenue to make on your money. And it's something we definitely considered when we were building Brookhaven. I think as the systems mature a bit more, you could then start, like a problem with that though is that then you can't rely on some technologies. Like you can't rely on really great room scale or something if your platform doesn't support that. But I think just being an indie dev, it's hard to self-fund your projects unless you're on as many platforms as you can.
Yeah, just to tack onto that, I mean, for when we started so far, we set out to set up a production model that would allow us to do kind of significant releases or new products, new games about, roughly an annual basis. So about 9 months of development time, and keep kind of production costs, definitely within a reasonable range given the size of the install base. And I think that's critical to finding profitability and revenue, obviously, in the early days of VR. But it's also important that because we need that speed of iteration and experimentation with game productions. I mean, there are 100 things that we've learned about VR just from our first year and a bit of development that we just wouldn't get if you were working on a project that took you 2 to 3 years to create, and then you kind of ship it with a prayer for success. So getting stuff out early is absolutely key because there's so much experimentation and learning that's happening, week by week in VR.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and in particular with early access. I would encourage anybody who is developing a product to consider early access. As Thor was saying, don't wait a year or 2 years like traditional development cycles. So you will learn so much in your first product on what you should do or shouldn't do, and quite frankly, from playing other amazing products. I know, we've learned so much from, playing other people's products out there, things we like, things we don't like, and it's a very iterative process right now. It's kind of like the Wild West game development because it's interesting. It's still in VR. You're still making games. You're still making products. They follow the, 80% of the traditional rules that we've learned over the last 30 years in game development, where we can reference thousands of other products and this is how it's done right, this is how it's done wrong. But that's not true for the 20% that's VR. And that 20% that's VR is the magical 20%. I mean, it is the most amazing new 20% where we're talking about interfaces, social interactions, experiences, interacting with objects in the world, immersion factors. There's not 1,000 products that we can point to say this is the right way to do it. So get out there, experiment often, and iterate quite a bit.
Yep. So I think we'll move to questions. So maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then we're gonna wrap up. So maybe we can get some help with the question. And while we're trying to find someone, let me just add one thought. And I think it's interesting. We live in this world of more snackable content, with YouTube and our series on Netflix and HBO.
I don't even know who you are, Kalivis.
And I do think that there's an opportunity to create these sort of episodical, smaller experiences that actually you see if they work, and if they work, you can build on them.
So, Michael, you are currently mirrored.
Okay,
hi, Michael.
Perfect. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I have all 3 games. They're awesome. Thanks, guys. You've done some really great work. But in terms of business, I was just wondering if you could summarize how big was your initial team when you started, each of you? How big did your team grow to? I know Everest spent a lot. Where did you spend most of your money? Was it modeling, developing, marketing? If you could just summarize each of your own projects in terms of how they started, how they grew, and it would be great.
Very good question.
Let's do 30 seconds each.
Yeah, I'll start as you mentioned, Everest. I mean, we started with a team of 3 guys. That founding a couple of years ago. We've grown to 13 people full-time in the studio today. So we were probably at kind of full production capacity within the company maybe 6-9 months ago. But what we also did is we co-produced Everest with another firm called RVX, who were actually the VFX supervisors on the film Everest. Really talented group of VFX guys, animators, and so on. And we actually scaled up the team to roughly double that size over some period of time when we were working with them. just to say briefly on Everest, we would never have attempted to do Everest if we weren't using the stereophotogrammetry process that we employ for it. The content production would have been way too expensive for what we would be able to hit in terms of the addressable market. So that was absolutely key to get the savings and cost efficiency. The other thing, also briefly, is use asset stores. If you're creating smaller VR projects, look to the asset stores like TurboSquid and many others where you can pick up royalty-free art and really cut back on your production budget if you're smart about the genre that you're choosing.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah. For Brookhaven, it started with 2 people, and the whole demo that we released was just like 2 people, and it only ramped up to about 4 people to finish it. So like it's totally possible to make a big experience that a lot of people see that, you know, in play that's just a handful of people. I think like VR's in that neat state now when we can do that. I mean, I think like there's going to be this point when the Call of Duties and stuff come in where there's 100-man VR teams, and I mean that content will be amazing, but as developers, it'll get a lot harder to stand out then.
Yeah. And Mike, very quick.
Sure. So for raw data, I think we started around 8 or so people. Since then, we've scaled up probably closer to about 20 or so. But going back to the whole concept of monetization and planning ahead, you know, we're putting a lot more resources and time and effort into raw data than we initially anticipated. Going back to like what Thor was saying is, you know, we were initially thinking, okay, we're not sure how big the market's going to be, so we were like, how can we get the biggest bang for our buck? How can the users get the most enjoyment out of this content? And then raw data was released, and it's doing a lot better than we anticipated, which is wonderful. We really appreciate everyone's feedback. So the team and resources and time frame we've been working on the project has been extended because of that.
All right, thank you so much. We are actually at a wrap, so you know we really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much for coming. I think my fellow developer agree, but this is an awesome experience. And what do you guys think? Should we be back in Allspace soon?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We love you guys. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. We'll see you very soon in Allspace again.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks
everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So this is Keegan again at Altspace VR. The fun doesn't stop here. So if you want to keep going to some events, we actually have another one open right now called Community Corner. That's going to be our Altspace team talking about some of our new features and some of the cool stuff to look out for. So please hop on over there if you want to keep hanging out. Otherwise, make some friends, hang out, go play some games. Anti-Hedral is one of my favorites, so if you haven't tried it yet, definitely try it. So thank you everybody for coming, and you are an amazing audience.
Community Corner doesn't load.
Thank you.
I see it now. Yeah, I can see it, but yeah, it doesn't load. I clicked on it like a million times already. I don't know what that was.
That's hilarious.
That was a little faster than I thought.
Okay, well, anyway, that was the presentation over now, so thank you very much for watching and have a wonderful day.